Welcome to our conservation storytelling workshop. This is a webinar run in collaboration with the Manta Trust and Ocean Culture Life in preparation for World Manta Day. So World Manta Day is an amazing celebration each year to celebrate manta rays and their relatives and their habitats, and it's on the 17th of September. And this year's theme is the power of storytelling. So essentially the goal of the webinar today is to understand the importance of storytelling in conservation, but also to learn some practical techniques for effective storytelling. And it's hosted by myself, Jasmine Corbett. So I'm the Manta Trust Media and Communications Manager. I'm a photographer, instructor, and scientist. And with me, I have Francesca Page, who's an artist, illustrator, photographer, writer, dive professional, explorer, and storyteller. So you can see there's lots of different skill sets involved, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with lots of insight in what we do in our work. So as I mentioned, is run in collaboration with the Manta Trust and Ocean Culture Life. So the Manta Trust is a global manta and devil ray research and conservation charity, and Ocean Culture Life is a global community of ocean lovers, storytellers, scientists, and conservationists that do everything they do through the power of storytelling. So it made sense for us to collaborate on this really special event today. So a very brief introduction to my background as I'm sort of starting off the talk today. I studied a degree in marine and natural history photography, so essentially wildlife photography. And since I graduated, I've spent most of my years living out in Asia. So after my degree, I moved to the Philippines and worked in quite a few different organizations, from sort of more commercial or tourism underwater photography to working with a Philippines NGO, so looking at coral reef restoration and habitat management. And I also worked as a scuba instructor to sort of build up my dive ability, which has been really, really useful in all of my work today. And after that, I moved out to the Maldives and worked with an organisation called Marine Savers, where I was looking at coral restoration and sea turtle rehabilitation. And it was there that I met the amazing Manta Trust team, who I was lucky enough to get a job with and managed one of their research bases in the south of the Maldives. And then got offered the position as media and communications manager. So it's kind of been a bit of a long-winded route to get back to where I am today. And I'm really lucky to be able to have a job that I'd always dreamed of during my degree. But it just goes to show that all sorts of experience is really, really important. And having a diverse set of skills will help you a lot. So why is storytelling important? Why does it matter? So visual storytelling connects people to the environment, sparking empathy and action. But conservation media campaigns can also help to actually inspire policy change. It can help with fundraising. It can help mobilize communities to get involved in the local conservation in their area. But one of the most amazing things about storytelling, particularly things like photography and videography, is that it transcends language barriers, which means that the information is much more accessible to a global audience. And it makes it a lot easier to engage people with critical marine issues, regardless of their background or where they're from. And success stories that are visualized through media can also help to demonstrate the impact of conservation efforts, which helps to lead to continued support in the future as well. So I always like to think of conservation storytelling as a really important tool for bridging the gap between the scientific community and the general public. Unfortunately, within the scientific community, there is a lot of really complicated data, hard to understand jargon. A lot of the information within academia is often locked within scientific publications that are hidden behind paywalls. So conservation storytelling is a really great way to transfer that information from the scientific community and academia to the general public in a way that's accessible, easy to understand, and digestible as well. So within conservation storytelling, there's loads of different tools that we can actually use, but these include and are not limited to things like photography, videography, stock libraries, which I'll cover a little bit in this webinar, which are really amazing tools for when you don't have access to camera equipment or you can't get out in the field. But also illustration, graphic design, and writing. These are some of the things that Francesca will be covering a little bit later on. But as some of you know, at the Manta Trust, we really celebrate visual media, particularly photography and videography. Whenever we run a new project, a new campaign, we run a new expedition, we will always have a promotional video to support this. And we use this in so many different platforms after creating these videos. So we show these videos at events, we use them as part of fundraising applications, in reporting for our funders. So having these nice little concise sort of like 2 to 5 minute videos to summarize the work that we do has been hugely beneficial for us at the charity. And we always get really, really good feedback about these as well. So I highly recommend people that are involved in science and conservation to explore these as tools to communicate your research. And you might have also seen that we really love graphic design. So these are some of the infographics that I've created over the past few years to communicate some of the important data from our scientific publications. So as I mentioned earlier, scientific publications can be quite exclusive to those from an academic background. Some of the information can be really hard to interpret if you don't come from a science background. So what we always try and do with our key publications is to communicate the most essential findings or the most essential data into these nice summary one-page documents. And again, we can use these at events and conferences. We can share them on our social media and our website. They're just really nice, easy to digest tools to help us communicate really, really important data. You can find all of these infographics on research.mantatrust.org. So that's our research portal where we display all of our scientific publications in a really easy to understand manner. So what am I going to cover today? Me specifically, I'm going to be looking at using photo and video in conservation storytelling before I hand over to Francesca. So to get started, I'm going to cover how to actually plan an impactful story. So the first thing that you want to do when you're either planning a photo story or a video story, so a documentary, is defining your purpose. So you really want to be thinking about who is your audience? Who do you want this story to be reaching? And how are you going to make sure that the message that you're giving across is impactful, but also essentially accessible to that audience? Alongside this, what is the message that you want to convey? Are you trying to raise awareness about a specific environmental issue, target an endangered species, or look at a conservation hero, so an individual that's working to protect the species? And finally, sort of, I would say this is the most important one, is what is your call to action with your story? What do you want your viewers to actually do after viewing your work? Do you want to raise awareness for a charity and therefore get more funds for a charity? Do you want to educate your viewers about something that is lesser known by the general public? Essentially, this call to action should always be influencing your story as you go, and it will really help to give your story definition and purpose. Then this is super important. It's really essential to be doing a lot of research on your topic. So before you head out to the field or before you collect your content, you need to be looking into who are the experts and the local communities involved. So it's really good to contact them in advance to conduct interviews and get their perspective on the wider context of their situation. Like, why are these conservation issues happening? Why are certain species threatened in a place? These are the people that can provide you with the information. So it's really, really important to be learning from them a lot. Also, you need to make sure that whoever you're planning to photograph or interview on camera, make sure you've got all the correct permissions in place beforehand, and make sure they're comfortable with being filmed. This is really essential, especially with things like protected species. You need to make sure as well you've got the correct permits in place to be able to film them. Having a focal character really helps to keep your story memorable. So it's kind of good to have a think about who or what your key character is. This is someone or a species that you want your viewers to connect to on a personal level and feel like they're part of that story alongside them. And then also, how do you want people to feel after watching your documentary or seeing your photo piece? Knowing this emotional reaction will help to shape the direction and the focus of your research. And keep remembering your call to action as you go along. Then another part of the planning stage is things like storyboarding. So with every story that you read, there is always a beginning and a middle and an end. So when you're sort of like planning your story out, it's really important to factor this in. So decide your beginning. So really think about the context of the story that you're telling. Provide your viewers with as much background information as possible before you present your conflict or your threat. But you always want to make sure that following your conflict or your threat, you need to provide a resolution. So what can the viewers do to be part of this solution? Ending with a really positive note helps to keep the viewer motivated. Having a shot list, a predefined shot list, really helps to ensure you get all the shots you need on the shoot. When you're out in the field, it's really, really easy to get a bit overwhelmed and try and photograph everything. But having a shot list that you can tick off from helps you to stay on track and leave the shoot with everything that you need on your SD cards. There's a lot of logistics involved, so you have to make sure before you head out to the field that you've got the budget, your interviews scheduled, and all the necessary permits in place. And I'd highly recommend organising this very far in advance, particularly things like permits. Sometimes this takes months to obtain. So it's really, really important to be thinking about all of these things early on. And then finally, with all your equipment, make sure you have backup equipment if you can, or a bit of a plan B if your primary camera fails. Make sure that you can also film on your phone if you need to. And then the final stage, which is probably the most important, is the execute and edit phase. Now, even during this phase, there's a lot of unpredictabilities. So nature is definitely the most unpredictable one to play with. It's really important to have some backup plans available, whether that's the storyline itself or shots that you can collect if the weather or subject matter doesn't play ball. Basically, it's always good to have a plan B or a plan C when you're out in the fields. And whilst you do this, it's really important to always collect more content that you think you will need. Filler shots are always really useful, behind the scenes content as well, just to paint a clearer picture of the story in hand. And then probably one of the most important things in the execute and edit phase is the edit itself. It's really important to take time to think about the audio and the graphics and the animations that you're going to be using to complement your work. And lastly, I would always say make sure to involve your subjects or your key focal character the whole time in the edit. You want them to be involved in the review process. Make sure that they are happy with the way that you're portraying them, because it's really important that you're giving across the message that they want to give out as an individual. So I'm going to cover some example case studies from some of the shoots that either myself has done at the Manta Trust or other colleagues. The first one is one of the most recent shoots that I've done. And this was a project for the Mobula Project Indonesia, one of our affiliates in Java in Indonesia. And this is their sustainable seafood network. So the purpose of this was to promote their newest initiative, the Sustainable Seafood Network. And the call to action was to there was many call to actions with this one, but to encourage local participation, increase local awareness, and encourage external support and funding. So because there was quite a few different call to actions here, I really had to make sure that the information was accessible to a really global audience, but also to a local audience as well. So ensuring that all of the information that was provided is translated into local languages, so the local fishers and communities could access this information. So it meant that I had to ensure that the entire time I was out in the field, I always had a project member with me so they could help with the interviews with the fishers and translating materials. So this is something to always bear in mind. Luckily, in the pre-research phase, I had the team on standby to tell me all sorts of information regarding the context of local fisheries issues. So they gave me a good insight into why this particular area is such a hotspot for shark and ray fisheries. They taught me a lot about the local economy, the fact that there's actually currently lacking alternative sustainable livelihoods for the fishers. So it's really important for me to be able to learn this in advance so that I could know the best way to portray the fishers that wasn't going to vilify them for what they're doing, and really try and show that currently they struggle to have alternative livelihoods and what the Mobulid Project Indonesia is doing to fix this. So through their sustainable seafood network, essentially. Something that I hadn't really thought about until just a few weeks before the shoot was also understanding the seasonality of the fishes, which I didn't realize they moved around Java a lot depending on the season. But even like the fish landings, the shark and ray landings, there was seasonality to this as well. So I needed to make sure I was there at a time when there was a lot of devil ray landings, because this is one of my focal species that I was looking at. So it's really, really important to consider seasonality very far in advance of your shoots. My pre-production plan, so this involved ensuring that I would be available for workshop attendance so that I could film some of the workshops that they were doing in the communities. I locked in dates for interviews quite far in advance, because you never know if team members will be away or they're not available on certain days. And also ensuring that I had lots of backup interview dates on standby. Luckily, I was living in Indonesia at the time, so travel wasn't too complicated to organise. But generally for fieldwork, you always have to make sure you're thinking about your travel, insurance and visas far in advance. And then during the time in the field, my kind of schedule was in the daytime, I was doing lots of interviews with the fishers and team members whilst filming at the fish markets. And then at nighttime, I was going on boat trips. So it's quite a busy schedule. You spend loads of time out in the field without much rest. So that's why it's really important to always be checking your shot list as you go, continuously thinking about your call to action. So you stick to your plan when you have limited time out in the field. So there were luckily quite a lot of outputs or deliverables from this shoot. So we were able to run quite an extensive social media campaign, which provided a lot of this context to the fishers and their situation and what solution the Mobulid Project Indonesia are providing. And of course, there was a promotional video, which we have up on our YouTube, and we use it, again, like I mentioned before, in lots of fundraising applications and ways to promote the project. Getting lots of interviews with the team and fishers has been really useful, because we have this now in like a stock archive that can be used for future reports, future articles. So having all of that interview information is really, really helpful. And after I returned from the field, I pitched the story or the project to the press or journalists, who can then work with media outlets to create all these different articles to spread the word further with the global media. And it's really important with all of your photographic and film work that you create to also enter these into things like photography competitions and film festivals. It's great exposure for your work and any conservation projects that you're documenting by entering into these competitions. So another case study is one of our campaigns at the Manta Trust called the How to Swim with Mantas campaign. So the purpose of this was not actually done by myself. It was our previous media and comms manager, Danny Copeland, who made this really incredible campaign. And this was all set up to promote a 10-step manta ray code of conduct. And the call to action with this campaign was to encourage divers, snorkelers and tour operators to practice a more sustainable manta ray tourism model. So as part of the research, before heading out on the shoot, our charity actually created a manta tourism code of conduct. So this 10-step guide, which was backed by years of research conducted with snorkelers and divers and actually made into scientific publications. So there was real science that was actually backing this media campaign. And in advance, the charity did obtain sponsors to fund the production. because this was the kind of production where you needed a private charter boat. There was lots of diving, there's lots of costs involved. So ensuring that we had enough funding to cover this trip. So one of our long-term partners, Carl F. Buchra, kindly supported this media campaign. And then the pre-production plan, so this involved scouting a very specific location to film in the Maldives, where we knew there would be lots of mantas at that right time of year, a pretty extensive shot list and script, and making sure lots of staff were available for filming the scenes, obviously obtaining the necessary permits, and then organising a private charter boat for filming as well. And then out in the field, so Danny had to allow time for filming at multiple manta sites, just in case those mantas didn't show up, because mantas are very unpredictable. They had to plan for lots of bad weather days because, again, the weather in places like the Maldives is super unpredictable. And he had a very strict shot list that he was checking continuously to ensure that the storyboard was fulfilled. And the outputs or deliverables from this campaign was a instructional video with the 10-step code of conduct, which is available in multiple languages so that it can be accessed from loads of different tour groups from all around the world. And then obviously, as you can see in the bottom right corner, this 10-step code of conduct guide, which accompanies the video, and that can be used in briefings by tour operators and guides. And all of these resources were made available for download on the How to Swim with Mantas website. So this formed part of the media campaign as well. It's actually a website created to display all of this. And within that website, there is an operator wall of fame. And this is a way to celebrate and promote any tour operators that are actually actively using these resources and give them a bit of a platform to celebrate them, essentially. So these are just some examples of how we've kind of planned media campaigns at the charity based on thinking about those call to actions and what we want those outputs and achievements to be after we've collected all of that content. So just to cover very briefly some of the essential equipment. So what I would say is that even if you don't have a super fancy camera, you can get loads of great content on camera phones nowadays. Some even have really good inbuilt microphones. But one thing I would say is it's really important to have a tripod. These are quite cheap, especially if you have a phone. You can get some really nice lightweight tripods. Just means that your shots are nice and stable, and it actually allows you to spend less time focusing on the camera and more time focusing on the person that you're interviewing. And then editing, there's loads of really good free editing softwares available, like DaVinci Resolve. Many websites also offer royalty-free music. So there's tons of really good free resources available online. Now, stock libraries, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have access to photography or videography equipment and you can't get out in the field, you can still participate in conservation storytelling. So an example of a great stock library is Cogia, and they are a non-profit media library, and they basically provide free scientifically categorized content for conservationists, scientists, activists, artists that are trying to spread a conservation message. So if you scan that QR code there on the screen, you can basically apply to be part of their network and use some of their content to tell your conservation stories. So they currently have over 100 members, and that number is increasing each year. And these members are using all of these resources for fundraising, activism, education, policy advocacy. So it's a really, really great concept. They also produce films in-house, and they support emerging storytellers from diverse backgrounds. So I highly recommend checking out Cogia and the work that they do. And just to finish up from me, something that I would really like to emphasize is our role as storytellers. So as storytellers, it's really, really important to understand the wider context of your topic. Make sure you're doing a lot of research and listening to as many local perspectives as possible, because often as storytellers, we are outsiders to a situation. So it's also important to be really sensitive. So be mindful of local cultures, religions, language, and other local prohibitions that you might face. And we should always remember that we are messengers. So we are there to communicate another person or subject story, not our own. And kind of in light with this, it's important to consider whether it's our story to tell. If this can be better portrayed by someone locally, that's when we should step back and let them take a seat and do this. Finally, be a responsible storyteller. So make sure that when you're collecting content, you're always following local rules and regulations. Essentially, we don't want to be disturbing wildlife or adding to the conservation problems when we're actually collecting the content ourselves. So that's a big thank you from me. If you want to follow any of my work, please check out my pages here, and the Manta Trust. Check out Manta Trust on all of the social platforms, mantatrust.org, and of course, worldmantaday.com. And now I'm going to hand over to Francesca. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming and thank you so much for having me today, Manta Trust. It's a privilege to be able to share my passions with everyone here, and also hopefully inspire people to create beautiful art to save our oceans. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jazz. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Francesca Page. I do a lot of things. I have a lot of skill sets. I'm a multidisciplinary artist and I'm very proud of it. I don't like to stay within a box. And also if you feel the same, then yeah, you don't need to be limited to one skill set. So I'm an award-winning wildlife photographer, photojournalist, illustrator, writer, and ocean explorer. I've been very lucky to have seen a lot of beautiful things around the world. And I would like to bring you to the next slide. So I kind of want to share with you my artist mission, my desire for adventure, storytelling, creating personal connections with my subject matter drives my work. I believe photography and art are powerful mediums to communicate the natural world and also serves as an important catalyst to connect you, the viewer, with the incredible planet I fall in love with. Art opens the empathy door, inviting you into a world you might not have ever experienced or investigated. I believe art is going to save this planet, and I believe it is going to be my mission to do just that. So moving on to the next slide. So I kind of want to give you guys a little bit of a background of how I've got to where I've got to. I have a bit of an unusual sort of upbringing to being an ocean activist. I actually had a massive phobia of the ocean growing up. Had a near drowning experience when I was 3, which caused me to be very scared of any type of body of water, including swimming pools. When I was 13, my dad bought me scuba diving lessons, which sounds quite extreme, but it changed my life. And I fell in love with the ocean. And so much so that I've dedicated my life to protecting it. When I was 17, I was very lucky to go to the Philippines, to a beautiful island called Malapascua. And if you don't know about Malapascua Island, it's one of the very special places on this planet where you get to see thresher sharks. And I was very lucky to encounter a thresher shark. But I had a very special encounter where on this particular day, I couldn't equalize and I was stuck at 5 meters. I was determined to see a shark, even though I couldn't get past that 5-meter barrier. And about 10 minutes passed and the dive master that I was with was going to basically wanted to end the dive. And I was like, no, I have this gut feeling that we need to stay in the water. And out of nowhere, this thresher shark just came to us and she started circling us so close that I could have reached out and touched her. And I remember in that moment, it must have only been about 30 seconds, but her big eyes, I stared into her big eyes and I realized that she was a sentient being. And actually she came to check us out purely from intelligence and curiosity. These animals, their prey are sardines, these tiny little fish, not huge creatures like ourselves. So I immediately after that dive saw sharks from a completely different perspective. It completely changed my life. And from that moment, I dedicated to spend the rest of my life trying to raise awareness about sharks and elasmobranchs. And then I studied illustration, which was an amazing 3 years, learning about how to communicate important environmental messages through the power of art and storytelling. When I graduated, I then went and studied, became a dive master and then a scuba instructor. And that is when I discovered underwater photography. I had a little point and shoot Olympus TG5, and I was just taking photos of the marine life purely to paint from. And then through that, I discovered a new passion and a new art form. It's just a different form of painting, just painting with light. And that's kind of fast tracked a lot to where I am today, where now I kind of combine all these creative skills, whether it's photography, photojournalism, writing, illustration, painting. I think it's a beautiful way to communicate the natural world in different and diverse skill sets. Move to the next slide. And this kind of moves on to a project that I sort of founded a few years ago. And I've sort of been working towards, here's a little sneak peek to some of the illustrations that are coming out soon. But on the 1st of October, I'm going to be launching 200 Sharks, a passion project of mine where I have the mission to connect over 1 million people to Lesson Ranks and get them to care about some of the most misunderstood creatures on this planet. And I'm going to try and draw 200 different types of sharks and rays. Why 200? Well, every 60 seconds, 200 sharks are lost from our oceans. So yes, anyway, next slide, please. Right, so what is artivism? So artivism refers to this practice of using art to promote social, political, and environmental change. Artivism creates works that are not only aesthetically compelling, but also carries a message or call to action, often addressing issues like human rights, environmental justice, political reform, and social inequality. Artivism can take many forms. It can be illustration, installation, literature, digital art, film, photography, dance, music, whatever it is that you're into. Art is just this umbrella to so many incredible art forms and skills. So I really encourage you to really think about opening your horizons to art and exploring different forms. The key aspect of artivism is that it seeks to engage the public, raise awareness, and inspire change by leveraging the emotional and communicative power of art. That's the beautiful thing about art. It connects people on an emotional level. To the next slide. So artivism is a beautiful thing. I love it so much. It's a great way to connect people through emotion, like I just said. It also is able to make people see things from a different perspective and make people feel, question, and see the world through a different lens. As an artist, you have the ability to take complex issues and distill them into visual elements, symbols, and metaphors, and transforming them into compelling and accessible forms of communication. As Jazz said earlier today, art is this bridge between science and the public. So we have this kind of very powerful skill. I see it as like a superpower, that I'm able to kind of take science, take conservation, digest it, and then sort of like present it to the public in a way that can make people see things from a different perspective. It's a great way to break barriers. Art can make activism more accessible and inclusive, reaching diverse audiences who might not engage with other forms of activism. So yeah, artivism is art and activism put together, if that makes sense. Creative expression. So this is your place to figure out what your creative expression is, what your unique voice is, what mediums do you like to play with. Mediums are super important. I have a diverse set of mediums, whether it's photography, writing, illustration. They're really powerful mediums, and I think each one serves a different purpose. And depending on what project I'm going into, sometimes I'll use all three, sometimes I'll just use one, sometimes I'll combine those. So that's something really important to think about. And collaboration. So whether you're collaborating with other artists, other people, other activists, or NGOs, charities, brands, is really important. And I feel like actually collaboration over competition all the way. If you're not collaborating, you're not spreading the word. Through working with other people, it's so enriching, and it's a really great way to get the message out there. Next slide, please. So planning a campaign. When you're doing artivism, you're probably going to want to do a campaign. Yes, you can do standalone pieces, which are very, very important. But I feel like if you're planning a campaign, that's really when some real power can happen. So I'm just going to do like a step-by-step of how I plan a campaign. So first of all is goal setting. This is really important. So what do you wish to achieve? Like Jazz was saying earlier on, what's your call to action? Who are you planning on working with? What's your subject matter? Is there a main character? And also, I think something that's important to touch on here, which Jazz has also touched on briefly earlier, is if you are working with a charity, a topic, an organization, or a person, make sure that they want you to document their work. And it's, I think, important to like know when, if somebody doesn't want you to document their work, then there isn't a story there, and for you as a creative to move on to the next. So goal setting is really important. And also a part of goal setting is, what do you wish to achieve from this? You know, what kind of art do you want to achieve? What's the, is it global? Is it local? So these are all things that you need to be asking. These are all questions you need to ask yourself. The second step is research. You need to be the master of this topic. You need to know it like the back of your hand. You need to understand what it is that you are, what it is you're creating art about. So this will involve potentially jumping on calls with scientists, people from NGOs, people from charities, other people online who really know a lot about the subject matter. Before I start a campaign or before I go out into the field, I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls, talking to people, learning a lot about their research, their work, or learning a lot about the issues at hand. The more that you know, the more art you can create and the better art you can create. Target audience is also really important. Who is it that you're communicating this message to? Is it for children? Is it for adults? This is really going to affect what the art is going to be like. If it's for children, it needs to be more colorful. It needs to be more playful. If it's for adults, maybe it needs to be toned down a little bit. It really depends. Also, something to say here as well is, when you're doing artivism, is it going to be the hopes or the wonders of the natural world? The horrors or the wonders of the natural world? Are you doing something on shark finning, for example? Or are you documenting the wonders? These are two very important parts of artivism, and they also connect to people on different levels. The fourth is mediums, like I said earlier. So what medium are you using, and what's the medium is going to be the most effective in communicating this message? If you feel like film is going to be the most effective way of communicating and you don't have the skill set, feel free and be bold and reach out to filmmakers and pitch an idea to them. Collaboration, moving on, just from what I said, that's really important. Collaborating with NGOs, scientists, other artists, filmmakers, photographers, writers, journalists, whatever it is, the more you can collaborate with, the better. And also, this is another place where you can collaborate is with brands and companies and that type of stuff to like get funding, basically, which I'm going to talk of a little bit later on. Planning the creation's really important, storyboarding, sketching. Before you kind of start creating the actual final artworks or going out and taking the photos, whatever it is, you need to plan it. So what I like to do, for example, before I go do a photo shoot, so photojournalism, I will usually draw loads of thumbnails of the photos that I wish to get. Usually I don't get any of those photos, but when I'm going into the shoot, I already have this vision in my head of the photos I'm wanting to get, which is really helpful. And like Jazz was saying, when you're in a shark fin market, for example, in Indonesia, it is very overwhelming. And if you haven't planned, you will probably end up not taking the best shots. But if you've planned it, at least you can be a little bit more focused going into that situation. Number 7 is funding. And I think this is something that I really wanted to talk about as well in this workshop, because it's not talked about a lot. Artivism is great, but at the same time, as artists, we need to make a living. I'm a freelancer, so that means I don't work for anyone, I work for myself. And for me to be sustainable with my artivism, you need to find funding. And this is something that's really important. I don't think it's talked about enough. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about different ways that you can secure funding. And then last but least, you've got the artworks, you've got the campaign, and it's getting the word out there. So that's using social media, reaching out to press, magazines, and also collaborating with people and NGOs to get the word out there. On to the next slide. So your role as an artivist. As an artivist, you hold a unique powerful position where creativity meets purpose. Your role is to use your artistic talent not just to create beautiful and thought-provoking work, but to channel it into something that can inspire, change, and challenge the status quo. You're an advocate for the issues you care about, using the universal language of art to engage people emotionally, making complex ideas accessible and spark conservation that might not happen otherwise. In essence, you're the bridge between art and activism, showing the world that creativity isn't just about expression, it's about making a difference. Through your work, you're able to reach people in ways that traditional activism might not, tapping into their emotions and inspiring them to see the world from a new perspective. Your art becomes a catalyst for awareness, empathy, and action, and that's a powerful skill to have. On to the next slide. So this is I'm going to talk a little bit about funding and sort of like brainstorming different ways that you can find funding to fund your activism and your artivism. These are ways that I've used in the past that have been quite effective. So the first obviously is social media. If you're not posting your work on social media, you need to. It's a really great way to connect with others, get eyes on your work. I mean, the thing about if no one's seeing your work, then the message is falling silent. And I know it can be scary spending hours on piece of art and then posting it to the world, but you have to kind of just get over that fear and just get it out there. So yeah, launch a social media campaign, posting your work consistently, and also it's a great way to reach out to other people, and you never know who might come along and see your work and then want to partner with you or commission you. So yeah, social media. The next one is merch. Get your work on merchandise, prints, t-shirts, other accessories. It's an excellent way to generate an income and also to fund your activism, artivism, and also to raise awareness for charities as well. The next one is publications. This is something that I do a lot of. So there's a case study later on, which I'll talk a bit more about. But I was working with an NGO, an incredible story. And before going out there, I was already in contact with a few publications and magazines that I already had contacts with the editors, telling them that I'm about to do the story if they're interested in like, me basically covering a story for them. And this is a great way for to get some type of payment. Some magazines don't have a lot of money, but always make sure that you do get paid. And if you're working with a magazine and they say to you they do not have a budget, they do have a budget, and I would walk away from that. It's something that I feel quite strongly about. If a magazine is publishing your work and you're not getting paid for it, that's a red flag. But yeah, it's a great way to spread the message and to also reach a new diverse audience. The next one is brands. So reaching out to brands and companies with a pitch deck. If you're not aware of what a pitch deck is, I recommend everyone doing a pitch deck, even if they're not pitching to anyone. Effectively, what a pitch deck is a presentation. And in that presentation, you give them the why, the when, the what, the how, and what your project's about. And also within that, you're asking for funding. How much money is it going to cost to fund this particular project? Whether that's an art project, whether that's you having to go somewhere physically to document a conservation project that's happening. It's a really great way to partner with brands, partner with companies, and also get funding at the same time. And also, you never know, you might partner with your dream client too, which is also very exciting. On to the next slide. Another one is grants. So I haven't yet to get a grant. I've applied for a lot of grants. I do feel like applying for grants is kind of like winning the lottery, but they are also a great way to apply for funding, and also get mentorship and guidance. So some really good grants that are coming up is the Ocean Culture Life grant. That's coming up in November, I think. Yeah, in November. Recommend applying for that one. We have the Vital Impacts grant. That one's ending this Sunday, so it might be a little bit late, but that's just for photojournalism. And it's just for local stories. And then you've got the National Lottery, which is just a UK-based grant. But once again, it's for local stories, but also a really fantastic way for you to apply for funding. And then the final one is just fundraising, you going out and just fundraising for that project. This is also a great way to connect people to the work that you're doing and to raise awareness. So yeah, on to the next one. So I sell merch. I just wanted to show you an example of stuff that I do. I really highly recommend people getting their artwork onto merchandise. Like I said, it's a great way to earn some money, but it's also a great way to spread the message and also make some money for some charities as well. On to the next slide. So here is talking about pitch decks. I wanted to show you the deliverables part in my pitch decks for the 200 Sharks project. I just thought it might be a good way to show you what it kind of looks like. So when it comes to deliverables, if you're not talking about deliverables, whether that's to yourself or to potential clients, then you need to be. And deliverables don't need to be complicated. If anything, make them as simple as you possibly can. So I have 4 quite distinct deliverables for my project. So one is 200 illustrations, which I'm already thinking, what am I doing? That's a lot of work. And also I hope to connect loads of people to Elasma ranks and hopefully make them care like I do. The next one is a social media campaign with the aim to connect 1 million people to shark and ray conservation. The next one is merchandise. This is a way for me to hopefully earn a little bit of a living from this project, but then also I want to give a percentage of the profits to the NGOs and charities that I will also be highlighting as well. And then at the end of the project, I hope to create a 200 Sharks book and an exhibition with proceeds going to shark and ray conservation. So yeah, on to the next slide. And then I have this quote pinned up on my board. I think it's super important to talk about aim for 99 rejections every year. Rejections, you can turn them into a positive thing. You're going to get rejections, especially when you're in this field. Actually, it's part of the whole process. I'm constantly getting rejected, but at the same time, with every rejection, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And if you're not receiving rejections, then it means that you're not putting yourself out there. And that's really what it's all about in this industry. And I sort of challenge everyone watching this to every single week, I want you to try and contact 3 people, whether that's a brand, a dream client, reaching out to somebody on Instagram that you would like to collaborate with, reach out to people. And yes, you're going to receive rejections, but you also might receive the most amazing collaborations in the process. On to the next slide. So I just wanted to give you a case study of something that is very recent. This is a very new, recent project of mine. At the beginning of the year, I traveled to Northern Sumatra, where I worked with an incredible NGO called Kebersamaan Untuk Lautan, which means Togetherness for the Ocean in Indonesian. And sort of the call of action and the objectives before going out there was we spoke to Holly, who is sort of the founder of the NGO. And this NGO is only a year old and it's had no media coverage whatsoever. Nobody knows what they're doing, and they're doing some incredible work out there. And she's just like, I want eyes on this. I want eyes on my project. They need to find funding so they can continue the amazing work that they're doing. And she was like, if you can use your creativity to raise awareness about what we're doing and connect people with how the fishes are, well, basically what's happening in Northern Sumatra is this NGO is working with fishes. So conservation and fishes are coming together to better protect critically endangered sharks and rays. So they're catching sharks and rays as bycatch, and this NGO is compensating the fishes the same amount as they would get at the markets to safely tag and release the rays and sharks back into the ocean, which is amazing. It's an incredible story. And so here are a selection of photos from my photo story. So for this project, I kind of leveraged all of my skills. I did photography, I did writing, and I also did illustration. Moving on to the next slide. So I partnered with Scuba Diving Magazine. I really wanted to partner with them because, one, I know that they love illustration in their magazine. And they have a really big American audience, which I thought would be fantastic coverage for this NGO, that's tiny little NGO in Indonesia that nobody knows about. And so I reached out to the editor. She fell in love with the story, and she was like, I'd love for you to create an infographic describing and showing what the NGO is into one illustration, which is something that photography and film can't do. Like I was talking earlier, like when you're thinking about what you want to communicate, think about the mediums. And so here, as you can see, it's sort of communicating the whole project into one image, from the fishes, taking all of the sharks and rays out of their gill nets, to tagging them, and then safely releasing them back into the ocean. Back to the next slide. So this is some of the other work that I've done this year, communicating important conservation and wildlife messages by working with magazines. It's a really great way to get your work seen by lots of eyes, and also do some impactful things. Like when I see my work in these magazines, I realize like my work's done some change. Like it's reached a really beautiful, diverse audience, and it's also accompanied with my writing as well. So it's a great way of like combining the two arts together. On to the next one. I also then reached out to Oceanographic magazine and pitched the photo story to them, and luckily they also fell in love with the story as well, and they gave me a 5 double-page spread in their latest issue, which I was very grateful for. And I wrote 2,200 words as well, which was so much fun, and I was really able to dive more into the project with that. With Scuba Diver magazine, I was only given 600 words. So just to sort of, that's the end of that project now. But also when you're doing these projects, I've now left that project with more stories I want to cover about that project, if that makes sense. That's kind of the beautiful thing about working with conservation and NGOs and people, is that you go there with one sort of objective and you come away just with so many other stories that you want to tell. So on to the next. So this is a completely different project that I also did this year. And when I earlier was talking about target audience, this is a very good example. So the target audience for this one was children, and Ocean Culture Life approached me and said, we've got World Oceans Week coming up and we're working with the astronauts, Nicole Stout, and we want to create an illustration that combines space and art together, but in a way that's really accessible for children. And we're going to be putting on t-shirts and posters and hopefully trying to get children excited about space and the ocean. So I spoke with Nicole and we kind of came up with this idea of like a swirling galaxy with lots of ocean creatures and an octopus holding a paintbrush and all of these amazing things. And so I created this artwork for them. And yeah, it was just really beautiful going to the event. I also did a speech at the event as well, which is a really beautiful way to connect more with people and spread that artivism message. If you want to go to the next slide. And then that very illustration on the 8th of October is going to be presented on Piccadilly screens, which is crazy. And I've only recently found out that this is going to happen. But I think it just goes to show, through collaboration and just saying yes to these crazy, unique projects, you just never know where your art's going to lead you. And like the impact and the amount of people that are going to see this work on the screens and hopefully connect with the ocean and connect with space and want to create art that raises awareness about those two subject matters. Hopefully that will happen on the 8th of October. So move on to next. Here are some standalone. So that was all about kind of campaigns. So here are also some standalone illustrations that I've done that I think are very impactful. So you don't need to do a big photo story or a huge 200 illustrations, which I'm about to do. You can also just create one standalone artwork that I think can speak 1,000 words. Both of these images don't even really have titles, because I didn't think they didn't need titles, because it says it in the illustration. So to the right, we have bycatch. So I'm talking about ghost nets and how they're floating through our oceans, just causing havoc. And whoever comes into its path, unfortunately, falls victim to it. And I feel like, yeah, it's been a powerful message. And I collaborated with Pangea Seed, which is an amazing organization. I recommend everyone here to go research them. Pangea Seed. They're an amazing organization in America where they're working with artivists from all over the world. And so we create a piece of art, we give it to them, and they make a print, and then they sell it. And some of the proceeds goes towards incredible conservation that's happening. And I was able to partner with them, and it was amazing. And I was also able to, this image was able to be seen by a larger audience than I could ever reach. So yeah, it was just an amazing collaboration, and I feel like a really powerful message. To my left, I have shark fin soup. I feel like I don't really need to explain much, but I was really touched by the beginning of the year. And this is kind of like separate from the project I just showed you of Northern Sumatra, but I was very compelled to create a piece because I learned a lot about shark finning, and yeah, it's just horrendous what's happening. And I was compelled to create a piece of artwork that tried to communicate in some way what was going on in my own unique artistic voice. On to the next one. And also, we've spoken a lot about kind of the dark issues that are happening in the world, but also you can connect people by drawing, painting, capturing the beauty of our natural world. And I'm also a massive advocate of that. I think you need to have a balance. You know, some people connect with the gore, connect with the horror, and some people connect with the beauty. And I think it's good to balance that. And so here are a few fine art paintings that I've done. They're huge. I usually do A1, A0, big watercolor paintings, and they're all based on my own underwater encounters and my photographs. And I really love to play like increasing the saturation, the magic, the wonder, exaggerating certain behaviors and movements, just to make people kind of have that sense of awe, wonder, that ocean magic. You know, the ocean's such a magical place filled with the most incredible creatures. And if I can just connect somebody, even if it's one person, to the ocean without getting their feet wet, then I've succeeded, especially coming from a massive phobia of the ocean. I know that as a kid, probably like seeing this type of art, it might have made me have a very different perspective of the ocean. I was scared of sharks growing up. I didn't want to be anywhere near sharks, and now I actively swim towards sharks. I'm that type of person. So I feel like I hope that through my work I can connect people, whether it's showing them the horrors of the natural world or the wonders. And yeah, I think on to the next slide. So things to look forward to in the next year if you want to follow along on my journey. Obviously, you have the 200 Sharks project. Like I said, it's launching on the 1st of October, and I'm really excited to show the world. I've been working really hard on the first set of illustrations, so I'm very excited to show everyone and get everyone's feedback and hopefully create some change in my own little unique way. And then my partner, his name's Liam Webb. He's a very, very talented filmmaker. We are creating a documentary series called Capture, Paint, Protect, where we're exploring, documenting, and protecting wildlife through art. And we are currently at the stages of, like I said earlier, with pitch decks, pitching to companies, brands, production companies with the idea. We've potentially just got one episode funded, which is incredible. And I just wasn't expecting that at all. But yeah, so next year, hopefully, we will be doing the first series in Indonesia. I don't want to spoil too much yet, but it's going to be big and it will probably be launching in 2026. So yeah, on to the next one. And yeah, just wanted to say a big thank you for coming to this workshop today. I hope you've learned something. Here are some of my details if you want to learn more about what I do. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Francesca. That was so amazing. I know that I learned so much from that. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge. We've had some great questions come through in the chat box. So we're just going to work through some of those. I am aware that we are close to an hour. So if anyone needs to drop out, feel free, but we'll go over an hour just so we can answer some of your questions. And thank you, Holly, for sending through your questions to the info inbox. Quite a lot in there, which is great. So we're going to try and cover as much as possible. So just to start off for Francesca, a question from Paloma. How do you deal with stolen art? So this is the big debate in the art world, isn't it?
Stolen art. It depends on what you mean. Do you mean like people online stealing your art or AI? That's the new one, isn't it? Look, I think I've had my art stolen quite a lot. And I think at first, especially at the beginning of my career, yeah, it hurt me a lot. But you know what? All art's stolen, isn't it? So I feel like I've got to a point where like obviously if someone's stolen my art literally and put it on a t-shirt and trying to make money from it, that's a problem, and I will try my best to take it down, and that does happen now and again, unfortunately. But I don't know if other artists are using my work, unless they're copying directly, then I think that maybe is a little bit of an issue. But look, if you're inspired by it, then that's great. That means that I've achieved a goal. I've inspired somebody to use their creative skills to create positive change. So I think it's a little bit of a mindset, and also knowing that it's just a part of the game. If you start posting your work online, it's inevitable that someone's going to steal it. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful in some way.
Yeah, we also find at the Manta Trust, unfortunately, we do find a lot of our t-shirt designs are often stolen, and we find them on other t-shirts online, which is super frustrating. But I would say, I guess, in terms of like legal backing, obviously like trying to report any shops that are stealing your content. Also like writing cease and desist letters directly to their headquarters. So we do that a lot. And most of the time when you send those letters through that are a bit more official, they will take them down. You could take companies to court, but I mean, when you're like a small charity or an independent artist, it's like you usually don't have the backing to do that. But there's a few little steps that you can take to try and encourage people to stop that. But as Francesca said, I guess one of the positives is people, it just shows that people are really inspired by your creativity. So despite it being a real frustration, there is like, I don't know, it's good to take it as a compliment as well in some ways. So then we've got a question from Jen. So do you have any tips or advice for someone who wants to pursue a similar career? I guess maybe I'll start off with kind of from my background. So I'd highly recommend either doing, like, if you can, like a wildlife photography degree. If not, there's so many great courses that don't involve going to university. So actually the first school or like first company I worked at in the Philippines as an underwater photographer, they were an independent company that offered underwater photography courses, and they had this like 2-week intensive program where I feel like a lot of people learn as much as I did during my entire degree. So there's really great options available. In terms of some of the other skill sets that I've picked up during the Manta Trust role, most of that has been through YouTube or Udemy courses. I'd never done graphic design or like website design or anything before starting the role, and I just learned a lot of that on the job. I would say just don't be afraid to try something new and make a lot of mistakes along the way. It's totally fine to make mistakes. I'm constantly still learning every day in my job. And I think as creatives, we never stop learning, and that's a really fun thing. So don't feel like you have to go through this really, really strict and lengthy academic route, because there's loads of options available. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Francesca.
Yeah, no, I love what you said about you know, we're not perfect, and we're always learning. And I think that's the thing, we're always learning. And if anything, if you're looking back a year ago from now and looking at your work and going, oh, you know, and you're seeing that growth, and that's a really awesome thing. Yeah, I think with arts, if you want to get into illustration, writing, photography, I know it's a really simple answer, but just pick up a camera, pick up a paintbrush, pick up your pen, and just start doing it. And start showing the world your work. Make a website. Websites are so easy to make now. You can get a domain for like £10 and a website for like £20, and then boom, like get your work online, get people seeing it, start connecting with people, start collaborating, start reaching out to people, reach out to your favorite artist, reach out to your favorite photographer. I do that quite a lot actually, and have sparked weird online friendships literally just from sending a message saying, hey, I love your work, it's great. And just go out and do it. And like we were saying about diverse skill sets, when I left university, so I studied illustration. Once again, you don't need to do a degree in photography or art to be an artist. You know, I'm in terrible debt to the UK government because of my degree, but I learned a lot from it, but I also have learned so much from just doing it, like graduating and then just doing it on the job. Like Jazz was saying, you learn a lot on the job. But like I know that for Jazz and I, it's like working as a scuba instructor, learning those valuable skills, they have been so important and impactful to the work I'm doing right now. Even if it's just, I'll get commissions to do underwater stuff, but they'll commission me because they're like, you just get it. You understand the lighting, you understand the colors, you understand the behavior, because I've just had so much time in the water understanding how to interact with these creatures, and because of that, that's implemented my art. So also if you want to learn to dive, go learn to dive, go do it, go do your open water. It's going to change your life. I'm a massive advocate for scuba diving and free diving and any type of ocean activity. So yeah, I mean, yeah, just go do it. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Francesca. So I'll go through some of Holly's questions. Maybe I'll start with this one for you, Francesca. When creating a visually heavy concept, what are some ways to ensure that the conservation message doesn't get lost in the artistic presentation? Sorry, that was quite a long one.
That's a very good question. So how it won't get lost? I
When it's
think,
visually
like we were saying earlier, it's making sure you have very good, very clear call to action and goals. So what is it you are trying to communicate? And I think that will drive everything. And if you're very, very clear on the communication side, like we want to communicate shark finning, we want to communicate bleaching, coral bleaching, then I think that will drive your work. And it is a heavy topic, but also remember that art is a beautiful way to connect people emotionally. And so I think don't be worried about the creative side. That's actually the powerful bit. But also really a really good recommendation is just reach out to friends and family. I do this a lot. I probably pester my friends too much on WhatsApp, but like I will create a piece of art and I will just send it to people, especially my friends who are not in the ocean community, who actually don't really care too much about it. They care about me, but then maybe not necessarily the ocean. But actually, they're the types of people I want to get opinions for because they don't understand the topics. And so if they're seeing that image or seeing the artwork or the campaign and they're clearly understanding what's going on, then you've hit the nail on the head. But if you're showing the piece of art and maybe, I don't know, it's a bit muddied and they don't really understand what's going on, then you just go back to the drawing board. Don't be scared to be like, okay, all right, I need to rethink this. And also send sketches to your friends and family too. Not the final piece. Send the idea sketch and be like, hey, do you get what I'm trying to communicate here? Get as many opinions as possible. So that's something I would really recommend. And yeah, don't be shy to get involved with the creativity because that's where the magic is.
Awesome, thank you. So another question from Holly, maybe I'll take this one on. What are some common mistakes conservationists might make when trying to convey a strong environmental message? This is something that I'm constantly battling with because I come from like I've done a lot of scientific roles and then now I'm working in a communications role. I think one of the common mistakes people make is forgetting that they're in this echo chamber where they're surrounded by people that understand their subject matter. You can often kind of get the feeling that the general public at least have a bit of an idea of the work that you're doing, but a lot of the time people really don't, especially when it comes to ocean species. So many people have zero connection with the ocean. So you really have to start from square one when you're working in environmental communication, and really just try and convey so much of the background or the context or the first steps to what you're trying to communicate. I think one of the best ways to do this is in your communication materials is send it to people that are not within your network or circle at all. So it can be really helpful to like send something you're working on to like, I don't know, your auntie that's never been diving or doesn't spend time in nature or something, and just say to them like, can you understand this concept? Is this accessible? Is this understandable to you? So I always think it's really handy to just reach out to people that are just in a totally different field and figure out if it makes sense to them. And if it doesn't, then you need to like step back and really like get down to the basics with what you're trying to say. At the end of the day, I think one of the best things to do is try and simplify things as much as possible, especially in this day and age where people are scrolling through social media. Their attention spans are like 2 seconds per post. So you really want to figure out what you can communicate in such a short time span, essentially. Okay, so moving on to some more questions. From Paloma. Hi, Francesca. Do you have any recommendations for the best university or degree pathway to help make becoming a scientific illustrator or artivist a reality?
Oh, that's a hard one. It depends on where you are in the world. I don't know much about universities outside of the UK. I studied at Camberwell College of the Arts, UAL. As much as it's a fantastic illustration program, when I was there, I'm not sure about now, but I was the only one in the year doing artivism. Like everyone just thought I was mad. Like I was this crazy girl talking about sharks, painting sharks, talking about veganism, talking about this and that, and my tutors, they just didn't know how to handle me most of the time. They called me the crazy shark girl. But then also I was approached by one of my tutors a few years ago from the same university course saying, oh, we now have an environmental aspect to our course, we'd like you to do a talk. And I was like, oh, that's great, that's awesome that that's, you know, that's happening, and like they understand that that's an important part of communication nowadays. Or another one that I now wish I went was Falmouth, which I know that Jazz went to Falmouth, but they do a fantastic illustration course there, a lot more traditional, and they also do lots of conservation work, and it's by the ocean as well. I feel like I would never have left if I went to Falmouth. And in terms of scientific illustration, there's loads of fantastic courses online. But how I started with scientific illustration is I just started it. I just started doing it. I left university and I just started painting fish. And I mean, I feel lucky. My sister's a marine biologist, and she kind of introduced me to loads of other scientists. So as much as I come from a creative background, pretty much everyone in my family is a scientist or an engineer. So I'm like the only arty one in the family. And so I kind of growing up was sort of surrounded by all of the fancy talk and the jargon. So I think they always sort of joked at the dinner table that I was the one that was like communicating everyone, because I'd always simplify it. They would tell me what they were working on, then I'd just somehow simplify it. And they're like, oh, hadn't thought of that. And I think it's just sort of like that creative mindset, just wanting to like communicate and simplify things. But yeah, with scientific illustration, it kind of just happened for me. And the only way it started was literally from just starting and posting online and reaching out to scientists, reaching out to people and being like, is there anything that I can help communicate? Is there a paper that you need me to do a scientific illustration for? Like reaching out to the Manta Trust, reaching out to different organizations. Like I said earlier, aim for 99 rejections every single year. And don't be scared to reach out to somebody with a PDF with your portfolio in it. Yeah, that's how also I've got some of my work, just reaching out to people and showing them my work.
Awesome. Thanks, Francesca. Summer's got a question. As someone who has an established social media platform already, how would you suggest starting to incorporate scientific illustration and art into the platform? I feel like this is probably best answered by you, Francesca.
I would just start introducing it. Like, I don't know what your platform is currently. I think if you suddenly switch to it, I'm not really sure, the algorithm's a funny one. I still don't really understand it. But just start showing people, like be proud of it. And like, yeah, all right, you might lose some followers, you know, but you're probably going to gain a load of followers from it as well, because they will connect with that work. And also, this is something I really struggle with social media. They want to put you in a box. They want you to post the same content every day. And as creatives, we're constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. Our style is like, my style is changing. And I'm really actually excited about where it's going at the moment, because the work I'm creating right now is so different to what I was creating a year ago. And actually, I'm in a similar situation to you, not with scientific illustration, but the artwork that I'm going to start sharing soon is quite different to what I have been doing previously. And it's taken me a while to want to share it, because I was a bit in the same position as you, potentially a little bit nervous, apprehensive, if people are not going to like it, people are going to unfollow me. And I've got to a point where I'm like, I don't care. I love it and I think it's great, and I'm going to start posting it. And yes, I may lose some followers, but guess what? I'm probably going to gain more followers and gain more people and more eyes on those artworks. And also, I'm passionate about it. And I think passion, like people love passion. So I think you've just got to be bold. And if it's something that you really are passionate about and that you feel a calling to, then start posting it. And, you know, I'm sure it's great. And I'd love to see your scientific illustration work.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Paloma's got a question for both of us. So for someone who is interested in conservation writing as a form of storytelling, any recommendations or suggestions on how to start? I guess maybe from my side, I would say kind of try and base how you're starting on other articles that you've read that you know have made an impact on you, and start to try and figure out like the structure of them and question yourself, like, why is that article so impactful? And then look at the kind of style that that writer is using. Something that I really would say is like when you're doing conservation storytelling writing, one of the most impactful things is including interviews from local perspectives or local researchers, writing in first person as well, like making it as personal as possible is a really good way to connect the reader. Like, I guess when you're writing in a scientific mindset, everything is in third person and it's all very like structured and methodical. Whereas when you're doing conservation storytelling, I feel like it should always just be more personal and emotional. But yeah, so I kind of think like the articles that you've read that you know have impacted you, just start to look into kind of what style that they're using and try and adopt that yourself. I don't know if you've got any thoughts as well, Francesca.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything you said is literally what I would have said, but I'd add a few more things with it. Yeah, make it personal, talk in the first person. And also think about a character, you know, like in that it's a story. You're communicating stories, right? You want to make sure that it's not a theme, it's a story. A theme would be Manta Trust, right? A story is a particular conservationist or fisher within the Manta Trust and their story. And I think that's something like when I first started doing conservation writing, I think I was, and even when I was pitching to magazines, I realized I was pitching a theme. I was not pitching a story. And I've got so much now, so much more interest from magazines. Now I'm pitching individual stories, talking about talking about an actual character, and diving into that story. And that's a lot more engaging and connects people a lot more. With how I structure my articles, I usually start off with a bit of a grab. So usually you dive into the story. Maybe you're on the boat, and kind of you have like a few sentences like really setting the scene, and then you go into like a lead, which is sort of an introduction. So then you start introducing the character, the project, the you know, whatever it is that you're trying to communicate. And then I usually do it into like 150 to 200 word bite-size paragraphs, and each one will be about a part of that story. So whether it's going throughout the day or the conservation or whatever it is, like with the piece I did for Oceanographic, I started off with like diving in on the fishing boat, hauling up the nets. Then I went into kind of introducing the NGO, the characters, introducing Holly, and then it's sort of I bounce back between a real thing scenario, so me actually on the ground, on the boats, or with particular fishermen, and then with sort of facts. And yeah, interviews. Make sure you have loads and loads and loads of quotes from all different people a part of that project. So you're getting different perspectives. The more perspectives you can get, the better and the richer it's going to be. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. So I guess we'll finish off with just a couple more questions. Maybe I'll bring in another one from Holly. I'll ask you this one, Francesca. In your experience, which type of narrative resonates the most with audiences when talking about ocean conservation? So there's personal stories, facts, or visual storytelling.
Oh, I was going to say all of them, to be honest with you. It really depends on the person. So everyone's so different. Some people resonate with the personal, some people resonate with the hard facts, some people resonate with the picture of the dead shark hanging in the nets. It really depends on the person. And I think it's actually important to highlight all of them. I do think personal encounters and personal stories are really important because it's able to you're able to engage people on an emotional level. And at the end of the day, humans connect with humans, people connect with people. I think that's something that's really important when you're going into doing artivism, activism, any type of storytelling, connecting people with a topic, a story, a conservation issue. If you connect them with a person, then you're more likely to get their attention than connecting with a random fish. As much as I love fish, when you're connecting with the general public, it's quite hard to, for example, I just did a project about wedgefish, which nobody knows about. And I was like, how do I connect people with a critically endangered ray? And I went down the route of connecting them with the fishermen, because it's people, and people can relate to it. So it really just depends on what the target audience is. But I think if you can create a beautiful personal story, whether it's your own or somebody else's, I feel like, in my personal opinion, that's probably the most impactful. I'm not sure, Jazz, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think, yeah, you've summarized it really well, actually. Thank you. Um, cool. Okay, so I'll finish off with a question from Summer. As someone who aims to have a role similar to yours, where would you begin searching? I have been stalking various job boards and social media pages to no avail. So yeah, for my role specifically, to be honest, I would probably say the most important thing is to have lots of patience. So I'm really lucky to be in the role that I'm in now, and this is kind of always the role that I had in mind when I entered my degree. But it has taken me about 10 years since starting university to get here. And I just did loads of different roles along the way that have helped me to gain enough experience to be really suitable for this kind of role. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, like I did loads of dive instructing, and that has then helped me to get the dive skills to do really good photography underwater. Working in tourism has also been really helpful for like people skills and people management. And working in the science, like science and conservation roles, that has helped me to better communicate the work that I'm doing now. But it does take time. I would say don't be disheartened that there's not loads of jobs really visible. I actually ended up getting my role a bit more organically because I was already working within the charity as a researcher, and just on the side I was making my own like videos and doing a lot of photographic content. And then it was actually like our CEO and my boss that heard about they told me about this media role coming up, and then they'd said, you know, we've seen the videos that you make and the photos that you put out, and we think you'd be really suitable. So I wasn't really expecting to be offered the role, but because I was kind of actively practicing photography anyway, that's how it kind of happened. But I would definitely say, like, if there's no jobs available, definitely try and work really independently, like with a lot of the things that Francesca and I have kind of been discussing within this webinar. Sort of acting independently to pitch these things yourself. So if there's particular art forms that you're really interested in practicing, like pitching those ideas to magazines and media outlets. And as Francesca said, which I think is so important, don't be afraid of rejection. Both of us have probably been rejected like countless numbers of times in job roles that we've applied for. So yeah, it's try and not be too disheartened by it, because I do totally understand how when you're looking for these kind of roles and they're not that visible, to quickly lose hope, but they will come up. It's just a matter of, you know, being patient and just accepting that along the way there's often lots of different job roles that you have to take to eventually get there. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. And I just want to oh yeah, go for it.
Add something quickly. It's something that when I left university, an ex-pupil who I was talking to in the canteen, and I really love to work, and I was like, oh, what's life like outside of, you know, university? And she said something to me that, like, and it stuck with me ever since. She said, you're going to leave university, or you're going to get into the big world, and you're going to be jobless, and you're not going to know what's going on. So one, always have a project, always have something on the go, a personal project, because it keeps you busy. It gets you, it's something for you to talk about when you, like, Jazz and I were networking last night at an awards ceremony, which was awesome. But and I was able to talk about projects that I'm currently doing that are personal. I haven't been commissioned. I'm just doing it because I'm passionate about it. And it's something that you can talk to people about, and you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who you're going to meet. You can talk about this project, and you know, you might stumble across somebody and they're like, I want to offer you a job. I'd love to see your portfolio. Do you have a business card? So that's something really important. And to never give up. Like, I know that sounds really cliche, but it's the ones that don't give up that succeed. And you know what? It's the art industry, if you want to get into the arts, whether that's illustration, writing, photography, film, or whatever it is that you want to get into, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And actually, if you see people who are rising really quickly, they might fall very quickly too. And actually, it's the ones that are consistent, showing up, doing good things for people. Your name will slowly start circulating in that community of like, oh, they were really great to work with, or they were really, really good. I'm going to recommend you. My name's been recommended to lots of people, and that's how some really awesome gigs have happened, just because I was patient. And actually, I got a very small gig, and that ended up being a massive gig a few years later. And yeah, there's moments where I'm like hitting my head against the wall because no work's coming through the doors, or I've just got rejected for the 50th time that year. But you just have to keep going. And I think it's like, I always say it's like a 5-year plan. Once you start, say, your art business or your career, first year's hard as hell. Second year, slightly easier. Third year, you're going to start seeing a little bit more movement. You're going to start getting a little bit more gigs through the door. Fourth year, you're like, okay, things are happening. People start knowing your name. The fifth year is when things start happening. You start seeing a lot more movement. So I just want to put that into perspective for people. If you're starting today with scientific illustration, writing, photography, film, you just have to be committed, because it's going to be really hard, and just to not give up, because your work deserves you to not give up.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you, Francesca. And I think super important to just always remember why you're doing it, like remember why you love it and why you got into it, because you want to enjoy it as you go. Like the whole point of the journey is to enjoy it. Yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you, Francesca, for co-hosting this workshop today, and a massive thank you to everyone for joining and presenting all of these wonderful questions. As I mentioned, we'll put this recording up on the Manta Trust YouTube and website, and potentially the Ocean Culture Life one as well. And yeah, give us a follow, stay in touch, and we'd love to see what you get up to after this webinar as well. So thanks again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful World Manta Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, thank you.